Hello and welcome to the Full Advisor Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Herod, and I'm very excited today because this specific episode is going to be for any of you advisors out there who have had that inkling of a thought or you're really close to making the switch to transitioning to the RIA model. So it's a very niched conversation today. And to help me on this journey as we go through this, I am excited to welcome Brad Wales, and he's the founder of Transition to RIA, which is a consulting firm that you'd be surprised, exclusively focused on helping financial advisors understand how and why to transition to the RIA model. Brad, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here. Excited to talk about this topic, and I'll steal your thunder maybe before you say anything to me about it. But I think we crossed paths by being fellow highlighted podcasts on Kitsis's top podcast list. So congratulations.
I know, that's where I was going to go first too. That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, how can you not? I mean, you just kind of hope for things like this sometimes, and you put your work out there and hope people see it. And yes, Brad and I, for listeners out there, we both happily made the top 23 podcasts for 2026. And I reached out to Brad and we connected because one of the main audiences of people who come to me shaping their version 2.0, one of the paths when people come in is they're either transitioning from wirehouse or broker-dealer or even a corporate RIA to the traditional RIA model. So that is one of the ways that established advisors kind of get into their, like I said, version 2.0. So I was hoping that you could, before we get into the nitty gritty, that you could just give us a quick summary of how you got to starting Transition to RIA so people are familiar with your background and, can just give us a little context.
Sure. The quick backstory on me, coming up on 25 years in the industry. Started the bulk of my career at Raymond James in various different capacities, but the bulk of that time was in RIA-related roles, so from compliance to finance to business development. And then now, coming up on about 6 years ago, I had a vision for what I've since built as Transition to RIA, that there was a need in the marketplace for just an independent resource to help advisors explore what this RIA thing was all about. Does it make sense for them, for their practice, for their clients? And if it does, well, how do you go about making that transition into it? So aptly named it Transition to RIA, either the smartest name or the dumbest name ever for a company. It depends on, I guess, how you look at it. But as you noted, I am hyper-focused on one thing and one thing only. So I don't do M&A. I'm not a marketing guru or anything like that. It is solely to help folks look at the RIA model, and if it makes sense for them, understand all their options, and then safely navigate their practice to it.
Yes, and what I love about what you do in your work is that it's so educational focused. I learned a lot just going to your website and looking at the plethora of podcast episodes and videos that you have out there, and just downloads and resources of anything and everything that has to do with the RIA model and transitioning to it. Anytime between now and the next 10 years for an advisor, it's all in there, like down to very specific questions, which is what I really love, because if someone just wants to learn about it and consider it, you have everything out there for them to be able to educate themselves before they even pick up the phone and reach out to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's interesting. Before I launched the business, you put some feelers out and talk to some folks and see what they think about it. And I fondly remember, certainly won't name names, and some folks I described, that was part of my strategy, was to make content where I literally just, and as you kind of alluded to, each episode is literally one question, and then I answer it in detail. And I fondly remember someone saying, oh, that will never work. No one's going to want to consume that. Or if you answer everything that the questions are asked, they'll have no reason to reach out to you. And
that's always the objection on everything. If you tell too much, they won't ever reach out to you. I'm sure you have seen.
I mean, my counter argument to anyone that's thinking about using, similar approach like content marketing or whatever terminology you want to use is, and how I rebutted this person is I said, well, at the time I said, well, no one even knows my business exists if I just hang the shingle. So you could say, oh, they won't reach out to you. Well, it's like, well, I'll take my chance as opposed to them not knowing I exist at all, And so I think it was very, very nearsighted. So I don't spike the football in front of that person, but I guess the key is don't always listen to everyone's feedback. It's not always correct feedback.
Right. And I think if what you're doing is in service of the end client and helping that person, even if they never work with you, and I bring this up on almost any marketing or business development podcast episode that we've done, it's like, even if they never work with you, they are grateful that you've educated and helped them. Maybe they're just a do it themselves, or maybe they already have another relationship and you've just filled in some gaps, but they're still going to have a positive impression of you and be happy to send people your way. So you're going to attract in the type of people that you need. And some people just need a lot of information before they're going to even make a decision. So,
yeah, agree. And you've probably heard this before with your own content or folks you've helped. And I certainly have plenty of folks that reach out to me and they say, hey, I've been listening to your podcast for a couple of years now. I'm finally reaching out. And it is the long game, right? It's not an overnight thing, but you play a long game, put just good quality content out there. That's my personal approach, and it has worked out quite well.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. Hey there, it's Kristen. Quick break. If you're enjoying the show and you want more, head on over to fulladvisorcoaching.com/resources. You can download the toolkits that I have there and join the free insider community. You'll be the first to hear about new trainings, fresh podcast episodes, and I share with you real-world strategies that I see working for advisors right now. That's fulladvisorcoaching.com/resources. Go sign up. It's completely free. And now, back to the show. So when an advisor finally does get to that point where they're reaching out to you, what's usually going on for them? Like what's that first conversation like?
Yeah, and it's having done, and I have a couple hundred of these conversations per year, and so then you do the math, all the years I've been doing it, obviously it's quite a lot. And I always even though I've heard most every answer to this question out there just from having done enough reps, but I always love to start those conversations by saying, hey, what has motivated someone like you, advisor team, to be reaching out to someone like me? And I think it's always just instructive what those answers are. And then there's sometimes some unique things, and someone is really upset with their firm or something, but it's usually just a desire to further advance their practice, their career. And no matter how it's answered, no matter how it's articulated, it generally comes down to one of two buckets. It's either, and it's often they're seeking both, it's a desire for more flexibility with their practice, and that can be measured in many different ways, and or a desire for better economics with their practice, whether current day income, long-term enterprise value, those sorts of things. And interestingly, and while I keep very diligent CRM notes and stuff, I'm not as good about mining the data to have specific numbers to share with you. But I would say, anecdotally, 90% of the time, the first answer that I'm given falls in the flexibility bucket. And so that's, it means that is the drive and motivation, and or maybe people just don't want to lead with, I want to make a higher income, but obviously the economics are part of it. But it is interesting. That's generally how the conversation starts.
That's fascinating. And I think when you and I had talked previous to recording, we had talked about some advisors are like running towards something new and others are running away from something. What do you see there? Like, how frequent is that?
Yeah, and perhaps fortunately, I guess for me, it's generally more folks running to something. I guess the sales cycle, if you will, would be shorter if they were all trying to run away from something because they're super unhappy and they want to get off a sinking ship or whatever analogy they have. And I'm happy about this. It's generally folks that say, hey, And just this morning, I had a first time call, and there's a similar theme I hear all the time. It's a classic case of, hey, it's not that I dislike my current firm, or maybe that I massively dislike the model. It's just my practice has outgrown the model that, yes, when I joined it 10 years ago, it was the right fit. My practice has changed. The industry has changed. I owe it to myself and my employees and my clients to at least be aware of, do I need to continue to evolve? And thankfully, those are I don't know if more enjoyable to work with those situations, because that's people that are not trying to they're not being forced to do something because of some bad circumstances. They're just saying, hey, it's time to evolve the practice, and that's the majority of the time. And I don't know if that's just unique to my audience, because by that point someone's already consumed a bunch of my content and reaching out, but that's generally my experience.
Yeah, and I imagine it's like anytime someone's, I know a lot of advisors who work with business owners, the business owners who are looking to their next, their future and being drawn forward, have a lot more success in that post-sale life than the people who had to get out unplanned or for a reason that they wanted to escape. So that sounds like consistent and long. And I would think, I think overall, working with someone who's excited about the next evolution is always a fun place to be. And I think it has a more successful outcome for sure.
And I think it's both of our respective values in the marketplace. It's a fun thing to help folks with. I mean, you're helping firms grow their practice, and obviously there's satisfaction that comes from that. On the advisor side, I'm helping folks sometimes start in a business for the first time if they're already W-2, or if they're W-2 now and they're evolving into being a business owner. And that's just a fun thing to help people with. I mean, it is, there's some parts of our business are not as sexy or not as fun, but they're necessary. Getting E&O insurance is necessary part of the business. I don't know that anyone gets excited about that. Some the things you and I respectfully do, it's there's a lot of work that goes into it, obviously, for advisors, but it's also a fun outcome to see.
Yeah. I had a recent group that reached out to me. I can't recall if I had mentioned it to you before or not, but for the audience, I was approached by a wirehouse team, a pretty large group. They had about $2 billion they were managing, and they wanted help with marketing. And as we were talking in the conversation, they said, well, one thing we are kind of quietly thinking about is transitioning to an RIA. And I was chatting with him. I said, well, I have to be honest with you. There's only so much in marketing that I can do while you're still in the wirehouse environment. It's a lot harder. So as they were describing where they wanted help and how they were doing business development, where they wanted the marketing freedom or brand ownership, the ability to build in a way that they want to. I mean, that's essentially some of the great benefits of going RIA, right? At least I can say that from the marketing side. It gives us a whole lot more, as you said, flexibility. Do you hear that kind of conversation often? Is that kind of a tried and true story in that way?
Oh, entirely. And let me preface it that I am not. I am a believer the RIA model is not for everyone, so I don't want to come across. Brad thinks everyone should go RIA. That's certainly not. If you've watched my videos and stuff, I repeat that quite a bit. But for the folks it is a fit, there's a lot of benefits to it. So one of those benefits is what you just alluded to. And the analogy I give often, there's all kinds of analogies you could use, but I say, hey, imagine you're playing a game of one-on-one basketball, and you, wirehouse advisor, from a market and business development standpoint, you have to play with one hand tied behind your back, and your opponent gets to use both hands. And that's the analogy. That's like, hey, if you're at a wirehouse, it just is what it is. Because of the way that model works, you're much more limited in the ways you can market your practice. In your competition, in the marketplace, in your community, there's some of those folks, depending on what model they're in, do not have those constraints. And so, hey, maybe you don't want to do a podcast or videos or write articles in industry magazines or get quoted places, but maybe you do want to do those things or some of those things or all those things. And guess what? Your competition is able to do that now. And if you're not able to do that, it is what it is. It's just an uneven playing field. So that's that goes back to that flexibility bucket, the ability of how to market your practice is what it is. It's significantly more flexible in the RA space.
Yes, absolutely. And along those lines, so you talk about the flexibility bucket. What are the economic buckets? Like when that is a driver, what are you seeing there? Like, let's just get into a little bit more of that. I mean, I think I could call that out, but then I know you take on more expense sometimes going into it as well. So.
Yep, and that's you gotta look at. There's all kinds of variables that go into it. So a common. And I don't preach with this, but you'll hear folks say, "Oh, in the RIA model, you get 100% payout." Which, by the way, ironically, it's not even a payout as your own RIA.
It's just your revenue.
You're just keeping the fees you generate, which is 100%. However, you do have expenses to pay for, some of which you're not, paying. Depends on what kind of model you're now. You're not line item expensive now, so it's. I always shy away from people that just try to, which is great, being proponents of the RA models. Oh, it's 100% payout. It's like, okay, yeah, but you have to look at the entire P&L. But from an economic standpoint, generally speaking, a couple things are going to improve for most folks. Again, if it makes sense to go in the RA model. One, just their current day income. So by the time you start at that 100% gross, by the time you work through expenses, it typically is higher, particularly against another, like a W-2 model. There's also is what it is better taxation with being an independent advisor, whether your ability to write off expenses you can't currently, or even, I don't want to say extreme as if it's a crazy thing to do, but perhaps even buying the building you're in. And by the way, building an asset that you're paying, you got to be paying rent one way or the other, and being able to depreciate the asset against your taxes, just as one example. And then it is what it is. The enterprise value of a practice in the RA space, unless something fundamentally changes over the next 10, 20 years by the time you're going to retire, is generally always meaningfully higher in the RA space. And then something people often overlook, it's not just the valuation you could perhaps get for your practice, it's how that is taxed. And so if you exit in that W-2 environment that is generally going through just traditional taxable income rates, if you exit in an RIA environment, and there's different kinds of environments, but an independent RIA type environment, you typically can have most of that taxed at capital gains rate, which for some advisors is half the rate they might be paying for regular income tax rate. So a lot of variables go into it that can be advantageous. But again, and we might get into this, that comes with additional responsibilities as well, right? So there's no free lunch. It's, hey, more flexibility, better economics, more responsibility, and that is a fit for some and it's not a fit for others.
Yeah, I was going to say, sometimes that is the draw to people, like they really want to have ownership over all of that and create it themselves. And for other people, I imagine that might be where it's like, I don't know if I'm willing to go there. And I am curious, just quickly before we get into more of the nitty gritty, is what happens when advisors are talking with you and they decide not to transition? And they're like, you know what, I think I'm going to stay right where I am. What do you see there, and what do you think is keeping people in the model where they are, which sounds like it could be a good fit for them to stay put?
Yeah, and perhaps just a result of, again, my business model and how I put myself out there, that I'm not cold calling advisors. I'm not just catching people out of the blue, suggesting, oh, wow, you should be looking at this RA thing, and they never even thought about it once in their life. By the time they're reaching out to me, that they're already thinking about it. That's probably consumed some content. So most of them generally end up continuing down that path. There are folks that, for a number of reasons, maybe it becomes a very long process, but measured in years. So sometimes they'll eventually get there. It's just not going to be here near term. There's different reasons for that. And then there are some advisors that look at it, and I'll give you like an example where maybe it's not a good fit, and they decide to stay put. And I completely applaud that, because I implore advisors, like, hey, you should at least just understand how it works. You might think you have the best thing now, and maybe you do have the best thing now. Well, just understand how this thing over here works, and at least then you're making a fully informed decision that, hey, maybe you are content where you are. So it never hurts. Right. I mean, it's a little of your time as an advisor. You got to invest some time, talk to someone like me, and learn about it. And if at the end of the day you conclude, hey, that's not for me, or at least you can be more satisfied that you're staying put. And so an example that I've seen, and I completely respect this, there are advisors that we just keep picking on wirehouses, but we kind of call it any W-2 environment, that have been an advisor or on a team for a very, very long time. They're very successful. They make very nice income, even though the taxation's not as good and whatnot. They're making a very nice income. And because they're paying so much to their firm to provide everything, they don't need to worry about the office if something goes wrong with the copy machine or the staff issues or whatever. Everything's handled for them. And so there are advisors, and I respect this, that say, hey, I make a very nice living. I show up at 9 a.m. I leave at 4. I don't come into the office on Fridays. I know things could be maybe a lot better over there, but I got a pretty good life going here, and I'm content. And I respect that. That's hard to argue against. But for those that want to be more entrepreneurial or want to keep their foot on the gas pedal, it's generally going to be more lean in the other direction.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can see both sides of that too. I was definitely someone who was itching to get out of a corporate environment to start my own business. So it was something that I just needed to do, and kind of not look back. But I appreciate there are many, many reasons why one may stay put.
To extend on what you just said, I was in that same boat working in that W-2 corporate environment for a good chunk of my career. Then once you kind of taste freedom or flexibility or whatever we want to call it, it's hard to ever go back, right? And so I think if you look at the stats of advisors that have left that W-2 world and gone independent, and there's different flavors of independence, but we'll in this example, use the RIA. I am not aware of any, in all my years, I've never heard of a team or an advisor that has transitioned to the RIA model in an independent path that has gone back to W-2, except for one scenario, which is a succession scenario. So sometimes there's cases where as part, they move, they start an RIA, every advisor team needs some sort of succession. It might be an internal succession, but at some point you do need to exit your career. And that might be selling to an RA that's a W-2 model. And so, you now need to go back to, or go to that RA for 2-3 years for the balance of your career. But if you take out the succession part of it, I have never in all my years personally come across or even heard of advisors that have made the move. So they did their homework to determine it was a good fit to begin with, made the move, and then at some point said, wow, I actually like that W-2 thing instead. Let me go back to that. I've never come across that.
That's interesting. And I bet there is some bias in there, just given that by the time someone reaches out to you, probably are more likely to have wanted to do that. So let's say someone does reach out to you, and I know that you have a very clear 3-step framework. It's on your website. It's kind of easy to digest and follow, very structured, that you take every advisor through. Can you give us like the 30-second overview, the 1, 2, 3, and then we'll dive into each one?
Yeah, I love to. I've said it hundreds of times by explaining this to folks. So as I point out that there's 3 layers to what I do. It's in this order on purpose, because if you can't get past 1, you don't need to worry about past step 2 or step 3. So step 1 is just, hey, how would the RIA model look for your practice? Does this make sense for you, advisor, to even be considering it? Would it even be a fit? Is this even something, do you understand how it would work? Are the economics motivated enough? Is the flexibility motivated enough? Let's make sure you should even be wasting time digging into this further. And at that point, we're not talking about tech providers or custodians or anything. This is just a generic educational conversation at that point. And then if we conclude, okay, hey, it's worth at least still digging into it, then you get to that second layer. And there's 3 main pathways into the RA model. I help advisors down all 3, so my comments are never meant to suggest one is better than the other. But on really high level, on one end of the spectrum, you can start your own RA and build out all the necessary solution providers around it. On the other end of the spectrum is you might join an existing RIA, all kinds of flavors about that. I caution people, don't come in with misconceptions about what that may or may not be. And then there's actually kind of a go-between model in between those two. And so that second layer is I say, hey, let me just educate you on how each of these 3 work. They all have pros and cons. There's no golden goose. and then let's figure out which one might be best for you. And then usually at that point, the advisor team is leaning in one particular direction, and we could always shift back, but we're leaning in one direction. And that gets us to that third step is, okay, let's say we conclude you having your own RIA might be what the best path is. Well, now what are all those variables you need to put into place, and how do they work? What can you expect to have to pay for all those things? How long does it take to get those set up? Who are the vendors and why you might choose one over the other? So it's just a matter of kind of working through this process to find kind of the best path, and not to make this into a sales pitch, but because I help advisors down all three, I'm not limited to trying to only pitch you on joining an RIA where that might be very favorable for some advisors. It's not going to be favorable for others. So that was super high level, probably a little more than 30-second answer, but.
That's all right. That's all right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, it's like, why spend time on 3 when you may not get past 1, right? Like it's something to think about there. So, I mean, I know we've talked a fair amount of should you even take this step down the path? How do you help them get to step 2? If like, at what point do you go, okay, this person, I feel really good about taking them to step 2? Like, what is it you need?
Right. And this is, I think, every advisor should always never lose sight of their own clients need this help. It's oftentimes advisors, they understandably, they don't know what they don't know, right? So they don't know the questions to be asking to begin with. So part of the benefit, just me having done this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, is to know the kind of questions to ask at the beginning. So that is just the basic things like, how much assets do you have and what does that look like between fee and commission? Now let's dive into the commission. Maybe we need to figure out if that's something we could solve for. How do you manage assets? How do you market your services, or how would you like to market your services? And it's really kind of a discovery process where, again, I usually start by saying, hey, tell me what's motivated you to want to have this conversation. Now let me kind of pick your brain to understand your practice, and let's make sure that what you're trying to accomplish is actually going to be potentially available to you to accomplish. And that's just it's just going through the motions of asking the right questions and kind of baking the pie, if you will.
Okay. And so once that advisor or team has clarity around, I think this is something we want to learn more about, then you go, okay, great, let's get into step 2. Is that?
I'll preface it by saying this is not a quick process. And at times there's things that limit how quickly it could be done, even if we wanted to do it quickly. But just for perspective, from when folks are first reaching out to me, and again, that those folks are already kind of on first base, and to use the baseball analogy, because they've probably done some homework ahead of time, it's usually, for the folks that end up seeing it through and making a move, it's usually 6 to 9 months from the time they're first talking to me to when that move might happen. Now, sometimes it's significantly longer, other times it could be shorter. But either way, this is not like some 30-day exercise where everything's figured out. And so usually these first conversations, and like take the call I referenced that I did earlier today, Zoom, the whole first Zoom, we didn't even get through the first one. We've now, as a step 2, got to do another Zoom solely to continue the conversation of the first one. So it's not like, oh, hey, spend 20 minutes with me on this first step, 20 minutes on the second step, and 20 minutes on the third step, and good luck to you. This is a very long process. And again, because of the order we do it in, we cut bait if we need to. There's no reason to go down this 5 Zooms if after Zoom 1, it's not going to be a fit.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think when as you get in, then from, you get to the point where you're like, all right, now let's start to think about what going RIA really means for you and what that looks like. And we get into step 2. How often do you find that advisors come in thinking, oh, I have to have my own firm, versus these kind of 3 flavors or distinct paths that you talked about? In like, what are the preconceptions there, and what is it that you're seeing once you get to this point when you're starting to explain, hey, these are the different ways you could go on this?
And that's a great question. So from anecdotally having done so many of these, I would say at least 80% of folks reaching out to me initially are thinking they want to have their own RIA. And again, for many of them,
That's what I would expect.
Yeah, we'll do all this, and that's the path that it will ultimately go down. And as I explained, I say, great, let me just walk you through all three. Just understand them. And again, no golden goose. And when that's done, a healthy chunk of those folks end up going on one of the other directions. And a part of that is just not awareness of how some of those other options work. And that's completely understandable, because why would an advisor that's only been in one model their entire career, perhaps, and sometimes even only one firm, why would they necessarily know how some of these things work? And so I alluded to it earlier, the idea of joining an RIA. And usually when I first start walking folks through these three options and I say join an RIA, sometimes someone will quickly rebut me and say, well, I don't want to sell my RIA, or I don't want to sell my practice. And the reality is that flavor of RIA exists out there that, yes, does require that you sell your practice to them. And by the way, there might come a time towards the end of your career, particularly, that you will find that attractive. But hey, there's other flavors of that where you don't have to sell, where you will keep ownership, where you will use your own brand, you will be 1099. And so there's a lot of education that goes into just, hey, hear me out, let me explain to you how these different flavors work. And again, some of those are not going to be at all appealing to certain advisors depending on where they are, but others generally they do find attractive. And from my experience, again, the 80% heavy or so coming in one way usually balances out half and half or so, with, if not maybe sometimes even more, going towards the join and RIA after they realize what exists out there.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I actually had Michael Young, who is the president of Integrated Advisor Network, who is, they're a large RIA who does the 1099. They provide a lot of the infrastructure. Advisors come and they maintain ownership. They get to maintain all the client relationships, do all that, but they don't have to deal with the headaches of all of the, compliance and how do I figure out which custodian and what do I do for operationally and all those different things. So to me, again, that was something when I had my RIA way back in the mid 2000s, 2005 or so, I had no idea that was even an option. And wow, how appealing that might have been, at the time.
And I don't know that in 2005, if there was that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't know how much there was either, but I will say it is very appealing. It's very appealing, especially if you're an advisor who enjoys client relationship, who enjoys business development and marketing and having ownership of a brand, and who you add and what you do. And you can still have the support in this sort of 1099 way. I think that's pretty interesting. Go ahead.
An example I give, and again, this is very high level, so the devil's in the details and every practice is unique, but an example I give of why people should at least consider that kind of these RIAs that, by the way, and I always say I'm not referring to some RIA down the street that has an empty desk in it that would love to have you come sit in it. That RIA exists. They love to talk with you. That's generally not what my audience is interested in. So it's more these kind of infrastructure RIAs that were built to provide kind of what you just described. In how I kind of position it from an economic standpoint, and I'm oversimplifying this, it's not this simple, but let's say one of those solutions takes, and they're all different of how they express their economics, so it's not this simple, but let's say they retain 15% of the revenues for all the services they provide you. And so sometimes advisors say, well, I don't want to pay them 15%, but okay, fine. If you have your own RIA, keep in mind, you got to build all those things out yourself that they're going to be doing for you. And let's say, and I'm just making numbers up here, let's say you building out yourself costs 10% of your revenues to replicate what they do. So you're not paying them 15, you're paying them 5 for the luxury of not having to deal with that stuff yourself. And is that worth it to you? Now, that sounds great. There's still reasons you might need and want to have your own RIA, so I'm not suggesting that's a fit for everyone, but there are some enticing offers that make this a harder decision than it might at first seem.
Yeah, well, I think that's pretty interesting how someone may come in kind of myopic in their view or knowledge, and then you're opening up to be like, oh, I hadn't really thought about it in that way. That's right. Yeah. It's really just the incremental cost. Okay, and I can see how how it can open up a dialogue and a conversation of like, oh, I hadn't even considered that. Let me think about that. And you can open. And I like that you aren't married to one path as being the best way. I think that's really helpful, just to be like, hey, if you are interested and we think step one, that transitioning to an RIA model is right for you. All right, great. Now we can get into 3 different flavors and play around with some levers and see what makes sense for you there. And then when you get into step 3, how do you like put the pieces in place? Like, what are some of those moving parts that advisors maybe don't anticipate, or what is it that you're talking about in this step?
Yeah, and I'll give you an example of that, but one last thing on the kind of the second level there.
Sure.
I would say I wish it was this simple. Like on my end, I don't have a secret matrix that you tell me how big your practice is, and I look at my little matrix and I say, yes, you are going to start your own RIA. That's the path. Yeah. Every advisor and team situation is different, and you could take one advisor team with 500 million and another one with 500 million. And we go through all this exercise, and one goes one way and one goes the other way because that's what works best for them. So there is no just simple black and white. Let me look at my little matrix, and you know, here I'll share the secret with you. Every group is different, and you got to go. The only way to do it is to go through all these motions. So, but to your question, let's say you've done that, and let's say you're going the path of starting your own RIA. Then it's a matter of saying, okay, well, what are all the things I now need to solve for on my own? And generally that exercise is looking at, what does my current firm provide for me now? For better or worse, they're providing compliance, they're providing technology, they're providing a place to hold my assets, they're providing me with E&O or whatnot. Okay, in that RIA space, how do I build all those out myself? And so just one example, and it's often one of the first ones that is addressed, is how to manage compliance, right? So every advisor has some degree of compliance, no matter where you are now. Now, it might just be because someone's dictating to you how you have to do things, and so you have to follow compliance. But if you have your own RIA, as an example, you now need to manage that compliance responsibility. And so the question is, well, how do you do that? Well, there is a whole process, and there's vendors you lean on for that, and you need to understand how that works and why you might choose one over the other. And so that's just a big part of what I do, is say, here's everything we need to solve for. Let me educate you on how it works in the RIA space, which you probably don't know, because if you've never been in this space, why would you know? And now let's just work on how to solve for it. And it's just going through the motions. And like I said, it takes some time to kind of work through it all, but it's a tried and true process. I have the luxury of doing this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. Advisors and teams who generally only do this once. It just is what it is. It's hard to be good at something you do once.
I just see a flow chart, right? With like little branches, like if this, then that, if this, then this. Okay, what about this? And like just so many pro-con lists all down the line, like which path to go? How do we go there? Now what do we think about? Where do you want to custody your assets? And all of the different things that come to place.
It's not rocket science. It's not that I'm the smartest guy in the room, but I have the luxury. This is the only thing I have to spend my time focused on, is paying attention to how these things work, how they change in the industry, who these vendors are. And advisors, as I always say, hey, you have your proverbial day job that keeps you busy pretty much 100% of the time. So, you know, how are you going to figure all this out on your own? And some folks do. There's the do-it-yourselfers, and I respect that. But you know, I think I can help people, you know, I don't want to say take a shortcut, but maybe take a
I was going to say accelerate the timeline by far. I mean,
yeah, well, certainly accelerate it. And then I think there is a little confidence building. I mean, I all the time, I'll have part of this process, an advisor reach out to me, and they've made some decision about something we've already talked about. And I've narrowed the field for maybe, hey, these 3 vendors who to choose from. And at the end of the day, they made it, or they're about to make a decision. And sometimes they just want to run it by me one more time and just say, hey, am I understand this right, that this would be a good fit? And there's just some confidence to that. And that's the same that advisors do for their clients. It can be scary as a client to, is this a good time to be invested in the stock market? Isn't it risky? And the advisors there walk their clients back and say, okay, here's why this makes sense to be doing or not.
Right. It kind of reminds me of just the way you're stepping through and being like, you have option 1, 2, or 3. Here's how we can do it. Whenever we, and it doesn't happen often, but whenever we buy a new car, my husband and I'm so overwhelmed by the fact that there are so many options and so many ways to go. And I have zero interest in researching any of it because I don't care that much, but I care enough that I go, okay, give me 3 options. You do the research, do what you want to, present your 3 choices, and then I will test drive, and then we can decide where we want to go. I was like, I don't want to go into the vast abyss of all that's out there. I want you to come back having researched and done 1, 2, and 3. And I can just picture you being like, hey, there are so many different, CRMs you could use or different platforms. And here are the ones that I see. And then if they bring another one, well, what about this one? Oh, yeah, let's take a look at that. Or here's the experience I've had with that. I can just see the repetition of you having that experience and being like, here's some options. Let's pick among them. And then person being like, oh, good, I don't have to spend all day learning every single compliance expert out there that I'd look at. And I think that'd be hugely valuable depending on the person's personality type.
I like that. I might steal your car analogy on that front. So yeah.
Oh, feel free. Believe me, I'm thrilled. I'll be like, just take me to the lot, line up the test drives. I'm good to go. I will pick from the available options, but or it could be like none of the above. But it's always been one. That does bring up the question to me of who an ideal client is for you. Like, do you work with a solo advisor? Or is it usually a team? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, and it's a common question I sometimes get asked of how big do I need to be to have maybe my own RIA? And again, because that's everyone comes in thinking that's the only path they want to consider. And a quick rant that I'm very passionate about is that if anyone has ever asked that question on a conference panel, or no disrespect, if you've asked that question to someone on your show and they give some immediate answer with some immediate number, usually there's an agenda behind that. So if you're at a platform provider that helps folks start their own RIA, but you have to have a minimum of 500 million to work with their solution, and someone shows up with 100 million, well, guess what their answer is? Oh, you shouldn't start your own RIA, you should join one. It's like, well, is that really the best answer for them, or is that just because that's the only way you can help them at that point? And so as an initial rant, I'd say careful with anyone that gives that answer. So from a regulatory perspective, you can start an RIA with 0 AUM. Now, there's arguments to be had and that are correct, that it is a scale game. So the bigger you get, the better the math gets. And you got to compare your size based on plugging into an RIA and where that is maybe more advantageous or not, or whatever the circumstances. But my kind of sweet spot, if you will, is typically advisors between 50 million and $1 billion. And I get that's a big range, but below that, the challenge is there's only so many options folks really have at that point, and the math can be tough for them to make that work. And then above, I do work with folks above $1 billion, but that's just kind of a different animal at times. And I'm a big believer you can't just go out there and say, hey, I'm everything to everyone. So I spend my time focused on how can I best help and service those folks that are generally between 50 million to $1 billion, whether that's one advisor, which it wouldn't be one advisor, obviously, when you start getting larger.
Right.
The lower end it could be, but it's advisors or more often teams.
Right. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And just quickly, how often are you seeing, or maybe you don't at all, do people come to you who work as part of a corporate RIA and they want to go fully independent from that? Are you seeing that, or is that just a different animal altogether?
I'll set the record straight and say I didn't ask you to ask that question ahead of time. That's you kind of tossed me a softball. So that is a big part of my market. Certainly, we were picking on wirehouse advisors, and there's a lot of interest from those folks. Increasingly, though, I see a lot of folks at what we would traditionally call an independent broker-dealer, which the theory that's under the corporate RIAs. The challenge is that word's generic. Sometimes that's used to describe the RIA part of an independent broker-dealer, or it could be a standalone RIA. And there are advisors, particularly like these independent broker-dealers, that are becoming increasingly, if not entirely, fee-based with their practice. They're under just that corporate RIA and maybe just a marginal piece under the firm's broker-dealer. And they're asking themselves, why not take that final step and take that final move? And so I certainly see a lot of that coming out of independent broker-dealers. And then the industry has evolved so much and I think this is what you were referring to, but that there are RIAs that have been around long enough and have matured long enough with their tenure that there are advisors that joined them perhaps 10 years ago. And at that time, that was the best solution for the advisor. And now that advisor feels maybe that they're ready to evolve and maybe start their own RIA. And so the term, breakaway has traditionally always been used to describe wirehouse advisors leaving, and I will continue to use that term. We're also seeing more and more advisors, break away just because as their practice, evolves, they're evolving with it. And sometimes it's starting their own RIA. Other times it's, hey, my firm's not keeping up with the evolution in technology and services, and maybe I need a better solution. So there's all kinds of reasons folks might look to break away. But yet, to your question, I absolutely see a lot of that.
Okay, yeah, and I've even seen some of that in terms of firms coming to me saying, "Hey, we've kind of relied on the resources of the corporate brand, and now we want to do our own thing and be completely, fully entrepreneurial, independent." And so we get into the how do we market that and what do we do and the communications around that and how do we build business. So it's not surprising to me that you're seeing more and more of that.
One last thing on that, a big thing I'm a believer in. As you think about those three options, you don't know how the industry is going to evolve over the balance of your career. You don't know how your practice is going to evolve. So don't go down a path that's going to close any doors for something you might want to do in 10 years. So maybe joining an RIA is the better path now, but you don't know. Maybe one day it will make sense to have your own RIA. So you don't want to go down a path where you're going to be signing some non-solicit or non-compete or anything like that if you ever do need to evolve further. So I'm a big proponent, and there's plenty of good options that don't require that you do any of that, is only go down paths that will give you the flexibility you'll want, because we don't know what the future holds 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Yeah. So to that point, how far in advance do you think an advisor should start thinking about if they were like, yeah, I know I want to go RIA eventually or switch that model? Like, when is it too early to start / when do you get going?
Yes, it'd be a little cliche for me to say, it's never too early.
Never, yeah. Plant your tree now or something.
Yeah.
Yesterday or something.
Yeah. Yesterday was a better time.
Yeah, 20 years ago was a better time. Something now, plant it today, whatever it is. Yeah.
And I will say there, right, the number one answer, if you talk to advisor teams that have made the change to an indepependent path, they always say, well, hey, do you have any regrets? And their main, right, every single time they say, Yep, exactly. So with them preaching that for me, again, it never hurts to have a conversation. And again, that's my style, is to say, hey, we're just going to keep this education up first. It's not committing you to anything. I'm not trying to pawn you off and connect you to someone or anything like that right away. Let's understand what this looks like. And like I said, it does take time. Even if this is the right fit and this is the right time for practice, it's still going to be generally many, many months and months. But there are ones that go years, and there's good reasons sometimes for that. There's maybe personal reasons. Someone says, hey, my youngest has got a year and a half left in college, and I need to get that out of the way first. Other times, hey, I took a check to join this firm, and I'd rather let some more of that burn off. Sometimes the economics actually prove that waiting around is actually worse than moving, but there's a couple reasons. But there's also a lot of folks that, and I delicately try to call folks out on this, that kick the can just to kick the can, or at least they start out that way. And they say, hey, Brett, I'd like to talk about this, but just so you know, I'm not moving for 18 months. And it's great. Let's talk about it. The next thing you know, a couple of Zooms later, everything's kind of fallen in place. There's a roadmap. And I say, okay, why again are we waiting 18 months? And usually folks, I don't want to say self-correct as if they were wrong, but they pull it forward on their own. And the reason is because, again, if this makes sense, so that's a lot of work has to go into determine that. If it makes sense, as an advisor or team, you are going to start to get excited about your new path, and anything that frustrates you with your current firm is only going to eat on you more while you're waiting around for this new path. And at some point, you're going to take your foot off the gas of trying to bring on new clients, because you're like, well, I don't want to bring on new clients and then have to move them, at some point. And so I see that a lot, where advisors set these far off dates. I work at their speed. Next thing you know, things are falling in place, and we pull it a good deal forward, because they realize, hey, if this makes sense and everything's mapped out, let's just get on with it. So kind of long-winded way of saying, just start the conversation, it could be months, it could be years, but at some point you just have to start a conversation and see where it goes.
Exactly. And so if someone's listening to this and they're saying, wow, this sounds like me and that's a conversation I want to have, what's the first step in engaging with you?
Yes, I'd love to. Anyone that wants to learn more, just head to the website, transitiontoria.com. On there, you'll find, I do, as we alluded to earlier, I have an entire series. My Q&A series is in video format, podcast format. I have articles, I have white papers, I have a vendor profile series. So all kinds of resources to help you learn more about the model. I'm a big believer that I got to demonstrate my value before I can expect you to commit some of your time to talking to me. So respectfully, I won't even give out a phone number here or whatnot. I'll just say, hey, go to Transition To RIA. If my content resonates with you and you want to learn more, if I've hopefully done my job correctly, and you of all people would be able to critique me the website if I haven't, that it hopefully guides you to the process of easily setting up a time to have an initial call with me, a Zoom. I generally do everything by Zoom. And we can kind of see where it goes from there. So transitiontoria.com, you can find my podcast. And also, I link to the Kitsis list on that. So Kristen's podcast is on there as well.
Yes, thank you. And I can tell you I've been through a fair number of your podcast questions just because I wanted to know the answers too. It's a good resource for even if you're not going anywhere, just to be familiar with vernacular and how different processes work. So a lot of really good, deep, practical answers there, and very specific, like we said, by questions. So it's like you can go in and get bite-sized information, be like, oh, I just want to know that. And you can learn all of that there. So I invite and encourage everyone to take a look, transitiontoria.com. And there are some free downloads as well that people can get there. Wow, this has been really valuable. As always, I can keep talking and talking and talking because I have so many questions and I find it really interesting. And you clearly have a wealth of experience in this arena. So I'm hopeful for anyone who's listening who is planning that version 2.0. And if the RIA path is on your radar, I encourage you to reach out to Brad and take a look at his material. And if you're in a position where you've made that transition or you want to start thinking about what marketing or business development might look once you do, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or at fulladvisorcoaching.com. Brad, thanks so much for joining me today. This was very valuable. I really appreciate you coming.
Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for having me on. And likewise, people consuming your content helps me, because that is, and I have a whole episode on this, and what is the most exciting or most fun part about making a transition? It is that, hey, wow, I can start building a brand and marketing my business in new ways, and how can I grow it? And that is the fun part. So by all means, I happy folks are consuming your content, because that's going to get them excited about maybe having more flexibility to do those sorts of things. So thank you for having me on.
Great. Thanks so much, Brad. And to everyone out there, thanks for joining us, and go out and make it a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to Full Advisor Coaching, the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please hit the follow button so you'll never miss an episode. To learn more about how you can become a part of the Full Advisor community, visit fulladvisorcoaching.com. Remember, stay connected and get notified as soon as brand new episodes release. Click the follow button now. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Kristen Harrod or Full Advisor Coaching.